Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Tiffany Long. I'm the community manager for Traefik Proxy. And we're really excited to welcome you to the roadmap to Traefik Proxy 3.0. This is part of our ongoing effort to be very transparent with the community. So you're going to learn all about the roadmap today. I'm going to let Manuel share all of the great upcoming news. As I said before, this is quite a short presentation because we wanted to make sure that everybody who wanted to come had the opportunity to, and we know that not everybody has an hour in their day. So the presentation is really quite short, but we did put a few extra minutes at the end in case you have questions. We would love to hear your feedback and questions. You can give them to us throughout the presentation, either using the Q&A button, which is really useful because it allows us to corral all of the questions apart from the comments. But you can use the chat if you need to. I'll be popping questions up from there as well. Furthermore, if you have feedback that you want to give us, that would be wonderful. You can give it to us here. I'll be collecting that in the end and sharing it. But you can also go to our forum. There's a wonderful roadmap post there where you can give back any feedback on the roadmap in general. And Manuel will tell you where to go to give feedback on particular issues that you're interested in. Like I said, we're really excited to have you here. So I guess buckle up and Manuel's going to take us on a journey.
All right, thank you very much, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, the roadmap to Traefik Proxy 3.0. As Tiffany has already said, my name is Manuel. I'm the product manager here at Traefik Labs. So I'm overseeing and mainly responsible for all of our product-related activities. I'm happy to be here and walk you through what are our next steps, what are we planning, what is changes, and hopefully get your feedback eventually. As Tiffany said, you can provide it through either the Zoom chat, the Zoom question and answer section, or you can also reach out on Twitter in case you want to get into a more deep and detailed conversation. With that being said, as Tiffany said, we are going for something quick today. Let's dive in directly and get to the fun part. So what will we cover today? We have 4 main pillars of topics we want to cover today. First, Traefik Proxy Roadmap and how to read it. So we are going to take a glimpse into what is the different items, where's what, how do you look at it, and all those factors. Secondly, we want to take a look at what is new features we want to have in Traefik 2.9 and 3.0, and hopefully getting your feedback on that one, because that's the most crucial for me personally. We're going to look at open governance and how we want to open up with you as a community and how we want to interact with you and how we want to kind of gear up how we work together. And last but not least, I want to share some quick glimpses on how you as the community are able to contribute to Traefik Proxy and what that might eventually mean. With that being said, let's get to it. So for the Traefik Proxy Roadmap, some of you might have seen that a couple of weeks ago, we launched our public roadmap. Our public roadmap sits on GitHub currently, and you can just check out what is the next items, the next big things, how are we wanting to drive that thing in general. So the roadmap for an open source product or project, better to say, such as Traefik, is something quite important because we are all a big community, right? We want to know where things are headed, but things might not be super transparent nor super obvious how decisions are made, why are certain items being moved, why are certain items not being moved, and just in general. So we want to fix that, and we want to help fixing that. And therefore, we have thought about a couple of initiatives. First, this whole roadmap, the public roadmap you see, right? That's generally built and informed by information we as Traefik Labs gather through our daily triage. The daily triage is, as the name suggests, a daily process where the core team and other related stakeholders, such as, for example, Tiffany, attend to the meeting and they look through activity on the GitHub repositories, for example, of what has happened during the past 24 hours. their main goal to when going through those items is to kind of get to the feel of it, right? Like we want to figure out what might be super important, what is might be blockers, is there a critical issue, a critical bug, is there a new feature, a new integration we might not be aware of yet, or whatever might be the cases. There's plenty of cases you could imagine. Based on the information we receive through the daily triage, and we are actually considering to start streaming those daily triage things more or less regularly. We are not committed to a date yet, but we're exploring the idea. So in case you wanna like, or you would like that, please leave us feedback so we can take firm decisions. But anyways, when we go through this, then we kind of try to do the decisions, right? And what it leads us is to that we want to get a feel on which use cases are super important and which use cases need to be prioritized. Based on those prioritized use cases, a couple of other different actions will kick into play. For example, if we prioritize a use case, and that does not necessarily mean that this use case is solved, for example, by a PR a Traefik Labs employee did. It could, for example, be a PR you as part of our community did, right? If we see that this is super important for one of the reasons already mentioned, it will become prioritized. Prioritized means that it will land eventually on short-term items potentially, and that means that we're going to start, for example, reviewing the PR quickly. Because if we see that there is traction and therefore it's prioritized, we want to ship it, right? We want to get to a state where we ship it. And therefore, it's super important in that case that we get things done quickly. With that being said, there are some other items or some other movements in general, let's say. Typically, what we have done with, if we look way back to the days of Traefik V1, the maintainer team has focused on working on core features, core areas on Traefik Proxy. Let it be performance, let it be TLS handling, let it be the certificate handling or so. Like there's multiple of those areas. And those areas were typically handled by Traefik Labs employees or Traefik maintainers at the time being. For a very simple reason. Those areas are really time consuming to work on. And as community, if you're contributing on your spare time mostly, that's just not a good fit. So what we did back then, very successfully, I would even say, is the core team focused on doing those core features, right? And you as the community, you just did all the other stuff around it, like having nice integrations, having good enhancements on the web UI, providing us with new providers to connect to different orchestrators or whatever. And when we then started to release Traefik V2 back 2.5 years ago, there was a bit of a gear shift, let's say. Like we wanted to do so many things. We added the separation between routers, middleware services, static configuration, dynamic configuration, all the big roadblockers, or not big roadblockers, but like technically big roadblockers. And this kind of moved the Traefik maintainers team into to be a position of like gatekeepers. And what we want to change is that the Traefik Lab employees actually become facilitators, which contribute to an open source project the same way you as the community can do. Because with that gear shift, let's say, we can actually work very closely together with you as potential contributors and even call for contributors. Because at that moment in time, we are all working on the same boat, right? We're all working in the same direction. And therefore it just makes sense if we go on that together. What that requires, though, and that's why we come back to the daily triage, is we need to keep this roadmap updated, right? It needs to be in a good shape because otherwise, nobody's knowing what like to work on next, what is the most important factors and all those scenarios. And therefore that is really important. But if that roadmap is so important, let's take a look at how you actually read it. Like you've already seen, there's 4 different columns, and the first column we're going to explore is the short-term column. Items added to the short-term are items that will be available within the next releases. We are currently planning to release 2.9 on September 27 with a given feature set, which we will explore a bit later. And we have planned to release Traefik 3.0, so the next big thing, around early 2023 for a variety of reasons where we will come to in a short matter as well. Items assigned to midterm are items that might be available in the next release. So it's kind of like short term, we have committed to deliver. Midterm is more like, it's like a stretch goal, if you want to see it that well. And if we don't manage that stretch goal for the next release, it will be available on the release one after. So kind of items that don't make a particular cut because they are midterm, they will kind of like being moved to short-term items for the next upcoming release. So we keep the chain going and we keep our features done. Potentially a release later because it wasn't a stretch goal, but still. The third column we want to explore is the nice to have column. Nice to have is a bit of a different go. Nice to have items and items that makes totally sense to us, right? Like we have really understood why mostly you, the community, ask for those items and why they are so important for you. The only problem with that is that we either currently don't have capacities to work on it from like the core feature team. And as I mentioned, the core feature team should be really on those core features, and we want to work closely more with community and contributors here, or they're just not aligned with what we think we need to do, because maybe we know there's a critical bug we need to fix or things like that, right? And therefore, we're going to track them in the nice to have column, which has 2 very good reasons. A, we keep them for future considerations. So maybe blockers have gone away or something else has changed so that we actually are now able to either move them to short or midterm. And at the same time, they are still visible, right? So that means you as the community, you can still interact on them. You can give them some subs. You can help us driving in a certain design direction, or I don't know. So they are still visible and we can still iterate on them. We can still iterate on them together, which I think is nice. Last but not least, and that's for sure the most difficult ones, is the ones that we marked and placed on hold. Things on hold are tricky, say, because we have understood, or we think we have understood the problem, but they need more work because either the problem isn't easy to be fixed, or the whole feature sense is not clear enough, or we don't know really how to do that best because there might be technical limitations that prevent us from doing it in a certain way, or I don't know. There could be like really plenty of reasons why we cannot work on them right now. But to still have them visible and to also allow you, the community, to chip in, provide ideas, provide reasoning, provide whatever you can think of, we're still going to keep them and track them and on hold. But yeah, we're just not currently working on them, and we are trying to figure out our ways and how to do it. All right, that is for how you read the roadmap and how the certain items work and how columns are assigned and things like that. If we now look at the short-term column, this is actually Proxy 2.9, right? And how does 2.9 look alike, and what is the feature set we're going to go with? We imagine the 2.9 to be like a nice and quick release, which provides a lot of nice enhancement and improvements, where we know that our community, you, are looking forward to and will like to use it. The first one is quite simple. So we want to disable TLS versions 1.0 and 1.1 by default. And I think we all know why, but still for quick context, those are super old, they are deprecated. They actually, if exploited correctly, they can provide some security risk. So we not just need to disable it by default. There is no way we should keep that open like it is right now. Then our console and Nomad users will become quite happy because and I think it was actually community contribution, we are able to provide support for canary deployments. So users utilizing either the console or the Nomad provider will have a better experience in doing canary deployments for their applications. IPv6 is quite a big topic, as I'm pretty sure all of you are aware of. And therefore, we want to support IPv6 in Docker backends. So if Docker containers now get IPv6 addresses assigned, for example, by the bridge network, then we can still pick it up and proxy the request to the correct backend, and therefore make the whole service work. We also wanting to add a new health check method to make it more easy to check health of a given service. As of now, the health check service would call a URL you can configure, and you can configure some return codes to actually look for. And if the returns codes are not matching, you know whether or not a service is available or not, and you need to drain it from the amount of load balancer service. With this new health check method, you are actually able to not only specify the URLs and return codes, but also check for specific headers to determine the health of the service. Then, and that's a tricky one, I would say, but it's a quite nice one. I'm personally quite excited. I'm pretty sure that all of you have seen the self-signed Traefik certificate by now at least once. And we want to improve our handling here, which means is that we want to add a way to specify some sort of default SNIs, let's say, which provides traffic in case the certificate is not matching, then with a proper self-signed certificate, with a proper signed Let's Encrypt certificate, rather than with the self-signed Traefik certificate, to actually improve reliability here. And last but not least, we want to introduce a new metric, which is called request size. The request size of an HTTP request describes how big this request is, right? It counts like with the body and all those technical aspects, and it just shows how big the request is. And we have seen a lot of demand for being able to monitor the actual request size of HTTP requests. So, and I think also through community contributions, if I remember correctly, we are now able to ship that metric with Traefik 2.9, which is especially important and helps in improving your monitoring solution. So that's been Traefik 2.9, right? But I'm pretty sure that all of you are not just here for Traefik 2.9, but also for the next big thing, right? So let's take a quick look at what that actually means in terms of Traefik Proxy 3.0. Before we dive into the actual features, I want to add one more word of caution. You will see a lot of features on the next slides, but please be sure that this is only not for the features, right? We know that we need to still improve user experience, for example, when migrating from Traefik v2 to Traefik v3, and all those site-related activities, let's say, but they're just not features. Like our wanted scenario is that migrating is as easy as possible, because only then you will be able to experience all the new shiny features we are going to show you next and get use of them quickly, so that you are overall still or even more like using Traefik Proxy. So for core features, and there we come with the core feature set again. So the features I'm going to show you on that slide is things we want to work on for Traefik v3.0 with the core team, as already mentioned. And you will also find all of that items on the Traefik Roadmap, which I just mentioned earlier, in case you want to look for more detailed information. So the first and most important maybe core improvement is that we want to improve the performance of traffic in case of HTTP handling. And we're currently looking to something around 20%. This is good, especially if we compare it with competition such as Nginx. Obviously, HI Proxy, for example, would probably still be a bit in advance, but I mean, it's HI Proxy, right? Nobody can beat HI Proxy in performance. We are going to look into making entry points dynamic. So that means that you don't need to know which ports traffic should bind on during startup, but that you can like dynamically allocate new ports as you need it, which is nice for scaling and adding new TCP services, UDP services, all of that. Also, and I briefly touched on that already, with Traefik v2, we added the concept of dynamic and static configurations because at the time being, we thought it actually makes sense. However, it turns out that the concept of dynamic and static configuration in itself is still very valuable and that we did it for the right purpose, but it's hard to understand. And it's like, or not hard, but at least difficult to understand. And that you as our community sometimes have troubles understanding where to place which configuration comes when into place, and all those factors. So we want to facilitate on that and actually make it more easy to configure Traefik to just greatly improve user experience. There is no more reasons to add. Also, and parts of you who are you are with us for long enough, you know that when we released Traefik 2.0, we initially did cut the support for Kubernetes Ingress resources, and we added the partial support back over time, bringing us to the state where we are now. But the current state is a bit it requires explanation in certain areas because it's not handling as it is on the kube standard. So we want to align this provider back to the Kubernetes standards so that it feels as easy as with every other Ingress control. We also want to add support for OpenTelemetry, so full support for OpenTelemetry to not only rely on metrics and traces through the other providers, but also through the standard. We want to add UDP middlewares so that you can actually utilize middlewares in UDP-based connections, because currently this is only possible in TCP and HTTP, and adding middlewares for UDP-based connections just makes sense. Also, we want to add more default settings for entry points so that it also here, the plan is to improve user experience and make it simpler to spin them up, especially in combination with potentially dynamic entry points. And last but not least, and I know that some of you have waited for it patiently, we want to move the support for HTTP 3 out of experimental support, meaning that we're going to have the full support of the specification, including quick and all those related activities, so that you don't need the experimental flag anymore in case you want to run with Traefik and HTTP 3.0. For that in particular, this is really the core features. And yet again, we are really looking for feedback. So whatever comes into mind, either go on the public roadmap, find the items, comment there, or leave the feedback in the other methods as mentioned. But we also have a separate list of features. And these features are features that we call community-driven features. Those features are features that where we see there is a lot of demand for inside the community, but we can't build that on our own. So we will need your help on getting those into Traefik 3.0, but we will come to that in a minute. We've seen demand for enhanced certificate management, let it be through certificate revocation lists or OCSCP stapling, which means that, for example, if every time Let's Encrypt revokes a root certificate, Traefik will be able to renew automatically rather of us as the operators jumping in. We also want to improve the Kubernetes Let's Encrypt integration to get away with the problems with having persistent volumes, persistent volume claims, have the correct set of permissions, and all those things. We want to integrate the Kubernetes CRD provider, like the Ingress route provider, with external DNS. We know that there is workaround with Ingress shims and all of that, but that's a little cumbersome, and we want to here get more close with the Kubernetes ecosystem again. We want to reiterate on fast TGI, which I think is one of the first issues that I've ever opened on the Traefik repository. And I think the issue number is still below 1000, like the actual ID of the issue. So that's really old. We want to make sure that we can support or explore options, let's say, to support fast TGI better. We want to work with you together on sticky sessions that are based on IPv4 or IPv6 hashes instead of just cookies, because, yeah, cookies are good, but they're getting a little old, let's say. We want to introduce broadly compression because we see you as our community have high demand for that. And also, last but not least, we want to be able to provide runtime data in dynamic configuration, meaning, for example, you define middleware to add headers. We want that you will be able to add dynamic values as header fields. And as I said, we cannot do everything on our own. And I think I did said that a couple times by now already. So for all those features, we really need your help, the community help, to actually get them going. And this can be by providing designs, or actually providing code, or just feedback, or whatever, because we need your help. And a good way to get started here is we host a hackathon during this month where we want to work together with you, the community, on those items to actually make sure that we all together can ship them to 3.0, because without your help, we will probably not be able to ship all of them with 3.0. So if you're interested in contributing, check out the hackathon. It's really a good starting guide, and we are really looking forward to your contributions there. So the last item for today is how do you actually become a maintainer, right? How do you actually start contributing? So first things first, start contributing. And as I already said, the upcoming hackathon is a great place to start contributing here. We also have a contribution guide, which has a lot of information inside, so please feel free to check it out. And we have tagged some items inside our repository with contributor wanted label and contributor good first issue. That means that we have separated some specific issues and feature requests, for example, where we see, or where we would like to see, that the community starts working on it. And for some of them, they're actually a great start to contributing. So if you're interested, check them out. We will gladly work with you together on those PRs and get them merged eventually. While doing so, you will familiarize yourself with our workflows. How do PR review works? How is the state? How does squashing work? And all that stuff. And you just get more, you will just get more of the vibe, let's say, which eventually makes it possible for every one of you who are familiarized with the workflows and all of that to actually become a maintainer if you decide to take a next step. And we are actively looking for new maintainers, because we cannot maintain Traefik for our, like, just on us for the whole time being. So there's also the maintainers guidelines, which describe more of the maintainers process, because it comes with responsibilities and powers, let's say. So if you're interested, please check that out again. The last thing I can do is thank to all of our nice and awesome contributors you see on the right, because all of them have contributed heavily into making Traefik v2 the version we currently have, and it's just an awesome version. With all of that being said, I'm personally really happy and excited for everything we are going to do with you in the future together. So thanks for attending the webinar.